talk to you about fake news. And I must tell you, this has been one of the hardest presentations to work on. I've been collecting all kinds of data for some time. My head got stressed, ready to blow up. And last night, I said, I'm simply going to write it down and let it flow out. I had to make some corrections this morning. I have a handout that my lovely assistant will pass out to you now from this. I think it's already happened. Let's get started. Did you know that there's about 15 billionaires that own all the media in the United States?
Wow.
There's a newspaper called Pravda, Truth, that was owned by the Soviet Union's Communist Party. We used to chuckle about it in the West. Ha, truth. Really. Now, today, in the 21st century, is there any difference between Pravda and U.S. news outlets? That is my question. Let's talk about COVID a little bit. Sometimes it's really hard to dig about, try to find about how big and how bad COVID is. A lot of people have been saying, oh, our administration is doing better than the rest of the world. And it seems like the opposing campaign is saying you haven't done enough. This appears to be the numbers. You notice that right now, the United States, it's in here somewhere, right here, 640 people per million deaths. That means 640 people die of this out of a million population. Notice the numbers are really, really similar, except the outlier, which is Peru. What's that tell you? We're doing about as well as everyone else.
Okay.
It's interesting information.
Wow.
Do any of you ever hear that in the media? You always hear, we're doing great! Or, we're all going to die! How about some sanity? It took some work to find this information, honestly. Let's see, not the biggest killer. Heart disease is the #1 killer in the United States.
Okay.
Accidents. Influenza kills like 55,000, at least in 2017. And Alzheimer's. Did you know that Alzheimer's can most likely be avoided through diet? Does anyone talk about that? I wonder why they don't talk about it. Could it be the food companies and the drug companies would rather just not have you talk about it? What about heart disease? What causes that? Isn't that also tied to diet and environment so much? Amazing. What's that tell you about the news? If the things that kill us, they don't bother to talk about it. And now COVID would be on the chart now. It took them a while. It's about maybe up here, but still pales in comparison to what heart disease does to us. So why do they not talk about this more? Let's see. Trump is not doing enough. I'm sure everyone's heard this. Trump's not doing enough. This is one of the things that I did find that, did you know that he, in his administration, created the largest mobilization of our society since World War II for PPE equipment? Look at these numbers. Personal protection equipment, 32.9 billion surgical masks, 5.5 million facial shields, 4.7 million surgical gowns, and what about all those respirators they produce? Wasn't there like a big shortage of them, and suddenly we're exporting them all over the world? Even My Pillow Man made masks. It's amazing. Industry came together. Even had 2 hospital ships deployed, and Samaritan's Purse showed up in Central Park to help out. Does anyone hear this stuff?
Yeah.
Hardly at all. Do anyone know where this came from, this information? It came out from something called Promises Kept. Has anyone ever been to the website called Promises Kept?
No. No.
It's interesting that the administration set up this website to talk about what they've accomplished. And it's actually ignored. When you do searches for greatest mobilization of our society since World War II, you only find one hit, this website. Why is that? Why would the media owned by those 15 billionaires ignore this totally? The only thing I can think of is maybe they don't want you to know it. Or maybe if they brought it up, they couldn't dispute it. So think about that. I know that we have political perspectives, but let's talk about information. And remember, a lot of the news is controlled by 15 billionaires who have an agenda. I wonder what it is. Apparently this is information they don't want you to know, is my guess. Let's see. Oh, I saw this last night. There is so much stuff in this little tweet, if you think about it. Let's look at the top. The billionaires don't like it. Everyone get that? They don't like this. Of course, it's Twitter violates the Twitter rules about spreading misleading and potentially harmful information. It's interesting how in our nation we have two groups. We have this group that's saying, we have to move on, we have to keep our economy going. The other one says, we need to shut everything down. Two perspectives. Of course, you've seen these riots going on, and it's interesting that it's all about white supremacy, is what the media tells us. All these riots and how bad things are and how bad white people are, blah, blah, blah. Could it be that if you have a group of people that have been struggling a long time and you tell them, sorry, you can't go to work, we'll give you $2,000 or something, but that's about it. You have people that are starving or bored, what happens? They riot. I read an article back in maybe early spring about COVID, and says, if you shut down the economy and you put people out of work, you're going to have riots in the streets. So we've had. But it's interesting how they shifted the narrative to it's all about race. Not saying that's not an issue, but I do think personally that if you throw people out of work, and it's interesting, those minority groups, a lot of them are more impacted by it as well. But what this is kind of saying is that, does he have a point? Flu season's coming, we know that. Sometimes we have 100,000 people die, even have a vaccine. And I think his point is, we're going to have to learn to live with this and get the hype down a bit. And it's interesting, is there anything really wrong with this perspective? Is this not true, that perhaps sometimes over 100,000 people do die in spite of vaccinations? In fact, some people believe the vaccinations actually hurt you. Take Two Healthcare does not actually recommend vaccinations. They recommend proper nutrition to boost your immune system, simply fight it off. Oh, by the way, I had a crazy idea. Remember how the government's spending like $2 trillion? Why don't they simply take a lot of the money and say, there's this group in Dave Ohio called Take Two Healthcare that has miraculous cures. Why don't we suddenly have a new program to fund proper nutrition and give everyone lots of vitamin D supplements so they could simply blow this thing away? I don't think they would do that. I think those 15 billionaires have some objection to those ideas. These are just my ideas and things to think about. Now, looks like I'm running closer to out of time. Now, does anyone watch White House press conferences? These are really kind of amazing press conferences. A lot of times I'll see this pattern where the press secretary, Haley, will talk about summaries going on, what's going on in the administration, and then she'll open it for questions. I've noticed in most cases they don't ever bother to ask anything about the administration, what they think is important. So many times the tone is attack. Finding issues with the president. One of the most craziest ones I saw was this one about these Russian bounties to kill U.S. troops. She would say, that intelligence has not been verified. That intelligence has not been verified. Do you think that in his classified briefing he's talked to it? Now they're asking her to talk about classified briefings? Are they nuts? And this question went on for weeks, and it's still popping up. Amazing. And there was one time where the president was talking about Fauci, talking about the proper way to wear a mask, and if you don't wear it right or something, it's not effective. The whole press conference, they're asking about why the president is misleading people about masks. Now, I must tell you, they're not looking too good right now because they have a problem with COVID-19 in the White House. Maybe things didn't work out quite right for them, but that was clearly simply an attack. Now, Chris Wallace, this one is great. Chris Wallace asked this question, will you now, as if he hasn't done it before, now renounce white supremacists? Will you now do it? He asked the same question in 2016. And back in 2016, Trump was livid about the question even then, because he'd been asked about 13, 14 times since I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing this now for 2 solid weeks. Now you're probably the 18th person to ask me this question. This is 2016. He's probably very irritated about the question. He decides not to even answer it. And what does the media say? Trump will not denounce white supremacists. Now, is that not fake or not? And a lot of people just buy right into it and they retweet it. A good friend of mine was blasting me on something I posted saying he's with the good old boys. It's like, what? What? So who's worse? The billionaires who do fake news or those who buy it and just accept it? We as Americans have a great country. We should defend it, and fake news is our enemy. And regardless of what you think about who should be president of the United States, be aware that there's another player, and it's called pravda. It's here. Russia has arrived. They must have gotten the idea from pravda. Who knows?